The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of a weathered general store, and Deanna Catherine pressed her gloved hand against the window, her heart sinking at the desolate landscape stretching endlessly before her. Sweetwater, Texas looked nothing like the civilized eastern cities she had known, just dust and wooden buildings that seemed to lean against each other for support under the relentless sun of 1878. She had traveled 2,000 miles to marry a man she had met only through carefully worded letters. And now, stepping down onto the dusty street with her leather trunk beside her, she felt the full weight of her decision settle on her shoulders like a physical burden. The air was thick with heat, even though it was only April, and Diana could feel sweat beginning to form beneath her high-collared traveling dress. Other passengers rushed past her, eager to escape the cramped confines of the stagecoach, but she stood frozen, scanning the sparse crowd for a face that might belong to her intended husband. Minutes passed, then an hour, and still no one approached her. The other passengers had all dispersed, claimed by waiting family or heading purposefully toward their destinations, and Deanna found herself utterly alone on that dusty street corner. She eventually gathered her courage and entered the general store, where a kindly older woman informed her that the man she had come to marry, a rancher named William Daniels, had died 3 weeks prior from a rattlesnake bite. The words hit Diana like a physical blow, and she had to grip the counter to steady herself. Everything she had left behind, her small teaching position in Philadelphia, her modest room in her aunt's boarding house, the familiar streets and faces, all of it was gone, and now the future she had carefully planned had evaporated like morning dew under the Texas sun. The storekeeper's wife, Mrs. Henderson, took pity on her and offered a room above the store for a few nights while Deanna figured out what to do next. That first night, lying on a narrow bed in a room that smelled of flour and dried beans, Diana wept quietly into her pillow. She had exactly $17 to her name, no family willing to send for her return, and no prospects in a town where she knew absolutely no one. The loneliness she felt was profound, a hollow ache in her chest that made it difficult to breathe. The next morning, Deanna forced herself to dress carefully and pin up her dark brown hair with deliberate precision. She would not surrender to despair, not yet. She had survived her parents' deaths when she was 16, had worked her way through finishing her education, and had maintained her dignity through circumstances that would have broken lesser women. She would find a way forward here too, somehow. She spent the morning walking the dusty main street of Sweetwater, inquiring about any position that might be available. The town was small, perhaps 300 souls at most, with a single saloon, the general store, a blacksmith, a small church, and a handful of other businesses clustered along the main road. The surrounding ranches provided most of the area's livelihood, and the men who rode in for supplies eyed her with curiosity, and sometimes with less wholesome interest. By midday, Diana had learned that there was no school in Sweetwater, no need for a seamstress, and no respectable work available for a single woman of quality. She was sitting on a bench outside the general store, trying to decide whether she should use some of her precious funds to send a telegram begging her aunt for help, when she heard the commotion. A horse had gotten spooked by something, a piece of paper blowing across the street perhaps, and had reared up, tangling its reins around a hitching post. The rider, a tall man in worn denim and a dusty hat, was thrown backward but managed to keep his seat through sheer skill and determination. What happened next made Deanna sit forward with surprise. Instead of cursing or roughly jerking the reins as she had seen other men do, the cowboy immediately began speaking to the horse in a low, soothing voice. He dismounted with fluid grace and approached the frightened animal slowly, his hands extended in a calming gesture. Within moments, the horse had settled, nuzzling against the man's shoulder as he carefully untangled the reins and checked the animal for any injuries. Diana found herself staring, not just at the man's evident skill with horses, but at the gentleness in his movements, the patience in his voice. In all her 22 years, she had rarely seen men treat animals with such care. Most of the cowboys she had observed in her brief time in Sweetwater were rough, loud, and often crude. This man was different. He must have felt her gaze because he looked up suddenly, and Diana found herself meeting a pair of remarkably blue eyes in a sun-weathered face. He was perhaps 25 or 26, with sandy brown hair that curled slightly beneath his hat brim, and a strong jaw that was currently sporting several days' worth of beard. For a moment, they simply looked at each other across the dusty street, and then the man smiled, a slow, warm expression that transformed his entire face. Diana felt her cheeks flush and quickly looked away, mortified at being caught staring. She heard boots approaching and forced herself to keep her eyes on her folded hands. "Excuse me, miss," came a pleasant baritone voice. "I don't mean to intrude, but are you waiting for someone?" "Only I noticed you have been sitting here quite a while in this heat, and it is not really the safest place for a lady alone." Diana looked up, shading her eyes against the sun. Up close, the cowboy was even more striking, with laugh lines around his eyes and an open, honest expression that immediately put her somewhat at ease. "I am not waiting for anyone in particular," she admitted, then wondered why she was being so forthcoming with a complete stranger. "I am simply considering my options." "Options can be mighty thin on the ground in a place like Sweetwater," the man said, his tone sympathetic rather than mocking. "I'm Thomas Callahan, but everyone calls me Tom. I work at the Circle Bar Ranch about 5 miles west of town." "Diana Catherine," she replied automatically, then added, "formerly of Philadelphia." Tom's eyebrows rose slightly. "That is quite a journey. Are you visiting family here?" The simple question broke through the composure Diana had been struggling to maintain all day. To her absolute horror, she felt tears welling up in her eyes. She blinked rapidly, trying to force them back, but one escaped and traced a path down her dusty cheek. "I apologize," she said quickly, standing up. "I should not be troubling a stranger with my difficulties. Please excuse me." She started to turn away, but Tom's hand gently caught her elbow, stopping her without any force. "Wait, please. I did not mean to upset you. Look, I know it is forward of me, but would you allow me to buy you some lemonade at the hotel dining room? It is respectable enough, and you look like you could use a friendly ear and something cold to drink." Diana knew she should refuse. She knew all the rules about proper behavior, about not encouraging strange men, about maintaining her reputation. But the genuine concern in Tom's eyes, the kindness in his voice, and the overwhelming loneliness she had been feeling for the past 24 hours made her nod before she could think better of it. The hotel dining room was modest but clean, with checkered tablecloths and windows that actually had curtains. Tom guided her to a table near the window and ordered 2 lemonades from a woman who clearly knew him and looked at Diana with frank curiosity. When they were alone, Tom leaned back in his chair and said simply, "So, what brought you all the way from Philadelphia to Sweetwater, and why are you sitting alone looking like your world just ended?" Perhaps it was the directness of the question, or perhaps it was simply that Diana desperately needed to tell someone, but she found herself explaining everything. The letters from William Daniels, the decision to come west when her aunt had made it clear that Diana had worn out her welcome, the hope that she might build a new life. And then the crushing disappointment of learning her intended husband was dead, and she was stranded with no means of support. Tom listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious as her story unfolded. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, absently turning his glass in his hands. Finally, he looked up at her and said, "That is a rough situation, no denying it. But you strike me as someone with considerable strength, coming all this way on your own. What kind of work are you qualified to do?" Deanna sighed. "I was a teacher in Philadelphia, but there is no school here. I can read and write, keep accounts, do fine sewing, and manage a household." Unfortunately, none of those skills seem to be in demand in Sweetwater. "Actually," Tom said slowly, "you might be wrong about that. The owner of the Circle Bar, Mrs. Abigail Morrison, is a widow trying to run a cattle ranch with just her foreman and a handful of cowboys. She has been looking for someone to help with the household management, the accounts, and teaching her 2 children. Her husband died last year, and she has been managing everything alone. I heard her just last week telling my boss that she desperately needed help, but had no idea where to find a respectable woman willing to live on a remote ranch." Diana felt a flutter of hope in her chest. "You truly think she might be willing to meet with me?" "I know she would," Tom said confidently. "I will ride back to the ranch this afternoon and speak with her. If you can meet us here tomorrow morning, I will bring her into town." "Why are you helping me?" Deanna asked suddenly. "You don't know me at all." Tom smiled again, that same warm expression that made his whole face light up. "My mother always taught me that kindness costs nothing and means everything. Besides, I know what it is like to feel alone in the world. When I was 19, I left my family's farm in Kansas because there were too many brothers and not enough land to go around. I arrived in Texas with nothing but my saddle and the clothes on my back. If folks had not helped me along the way, I do not know where I would be today." Deanna felt tears threatening again, but this time they were tears of gratitude rather than despair. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Truly thank you." Tom tipped his hat to her, his eyes twinkling. "Don't thank me yet. You have not met Mrs. Morrison. She is a formidable woman, and she will have high standards for anyone working in her home, but I have a feeling you will do just fine." True to his word, Tom returned the next morning with Mrs. Morrison, a tall, straight-backed woman in her 40s with graying hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. She questioned Deanna thoroughly about her education, her experience, her reasons for coming west, and her expectations for the position. Diana answered honestly, holding nothing back about her circumstances. She could sense Mrs. Morrison assessing not just her qualifications but her character, and she forced herself to meet the older woman's gaze steadily. Finally, Mrs. Morrison nodded. "I will offer you a 3-month trial period. You will have your own room in the ranch house, meals provided, and a salary of $20 per month. Your duties will include teaching my children, managing the household accounts, overseeing the cooking and cleaning, and helping me with correspondence. The work will be demanding, and the ranch is isolated. We are 5 miles from town, and you will not have much opportunity for social interaction beyond the ranch hands and the occasional visitor. If that is acceptable to you, you can start immediately." "It is more than acceptable," Deanna said, relief flooding through her. "Thank you, Mrs. Morrison. I will work very hard, I promise you." "I am sure you will," Mrs. Morrison said dryly. "Thomas speaks very highly of you, which carries considerable weight. He is one of my best men and an excellent judge of character." Deanna glanced at Tom, who was standing near the door, and he gave her an encouraging smile that made something warm bloom in her chest. She quickly looked away, reminding herself that she owed this man her gratitude and nothing more. She could not afford to develop feelings for a cowboy, no matter how kind he might be. Her focus needed to be on establishing her position and securing her future. The ride to the Circle Bar Ranch was Diana's first real look at the Texas landscape beyond the town. The land rolled away in endless waves of brown grass and scattered mesquite trees, under a sky so blue and vast, it seemed to swallow everything beneath it. Tom drove the wagon with easy competence while Mrs. Morrison sat beside Deanna in the back, pointing out landmarks and explaining the ranch's operations. The ranch house itself was a surprise. Diana had expected something rough and primitive, but instead found a substantial two-story structure built of white painted wood with a wide front porch and actual glass windows. It was not grand by Eastern standards, but it was solid and well-maintained, with a barn, several outbuildings, and a large corral visible beyond the main house. Mrs. Morrison's children, Sarah, who was 9, and Benjamin, who was 7, appeared on the porch as the wagon pulled up. They were both curious about Deanna, studying her with the frank interest of children raised in isolation. Deanna smiled at them, recognizing the intelligence in their eyes and the slight wariness of children who had lost a parent. Tom helped Deanna down from the wagon, his hands strong and steady on her waist, and she was acutely aware of the warmth of his touch even through the layers of her dress. "Welcome to the Circle Bar," he said softly. "I think you are going to do well here." Over the following weeks, Diana threw herself into her new position with determination. She quickly established a routine with the children, teaching them reading, writing, arithmetic, history, and geography each morning. They were hungry for knowledge and surprisingly well-behaved, though Benjamin had a mischievous streak that occasionally required firm handling. In the afternoons, she worked on the household accounts, discovering that Mrs. Morrison had let them fall into considerable disarray in the months since her husband's death. The work was demanding, but Deanna found it satisfying in a way her teaching position in Philadelphia had never been. She felt needed here, valued. Mrs. Morrison, though exacting in her standards, was fair and gradually seemed to trust Deanna more with each passing day. The household staff, consisting of a cook named Rosa and a young woman named Mary who helped with the heavy cleaning, accepted Diana without any apparent resentment. And then there was Tom. Diana saw him nearly every day as he worked around the ranch and often came to the main house for meals with the other hands. She learned that he was not just a cowboy but Mrs. Morrison's right-hand man when it came to training horses. He had a gift for it, a patience and understanding of equine nature that was remarkable to witness. She would sometimes watch from the window as he worked with a difficult horse in the corral, always gentle but firm, never losing his temper even when kicked or bitten. Tom seemed to find excuses to speak with her whenever possible. He would linger after meals, asking about her day or the children's progress. He brought her wildflowers he had found on the range, claiming they reminded him of her. He made her laugh with stories about the ranch hands and the various mishaps that occurred when dealing with cattle and horses. His presence brightened her days in a way Deanna had not expected and was not entirely sure she should allow. One evening in early May, about 3 weeks after Diana had arrived at the Circle Bar, Tom found her sitting on the front porch after the children had gone to bed. The sun was setting in a spectacular display of orange and pink, and the air had finally cooled from the day's heat. "Mind if I join you?" Tom asked, his hat in his hands. "Please do," Deanna said, gesturing to the empty rocking chair beside her own. They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, watching the colors shift across the vast sky. Finally, Tom said, "You have settled in well here, Mrs. Morrison told me today that she does not know how she managed without you. Deanna felt pleasure at the compliment. That is kind of her to say. I am enjoying the work more than I expected. The children are wonderful, and Mrs. Morrison is a remarkable woman. She is that, Tom agreed. She has kept this ranch going through some tough times. A lot of men would have given up after her husband died, but not Abigail Morrison. He paused, then added quietly, "You remind me of her in some ways. Strong, determined, not willing to give up even when things look impossible." Deanna turned to look at him and found his blue eyes already fixed on her face. There was something in his expression that made her heart beat faster. "Tom," she began, then stopped, not sure what she wanted to say. "I know this is forward of me," Tom said, leaning forward slightly. "And I know you have only been here a short time. But I cannot stop thinking about you, Deanna. From that first day I saw you sitting alone in town, looking so lost and so brave at the same time, I have not been able to get you out of my mind." Diana's breath caught in her throat. She knew she should discourage this, should remind him that she was an employee in his employer's home and that she could not afford any complications. But the words would not come. Instead, she heard herself say, "I think about you too." Tom's face lit up with such obvious joy that Diana could not help but smile in response. "Do you truly?" he asked. "Because if there is a chance you might feel even a fraction of what I feel, I would like permission to court you properly. I know I am just a cowboy without much to my name, but I work hard, and I have been saving my wages. I have dreams of starting my own horse ranch someday, and I would be honored if you would let me try to win your heart." "You do not have to try very hard," Deanna admitted, feeling her cheeks flush. "I think you have been winning it since the day you bought me lemonade and listened to a stranger's troubles." Tom reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. His palm was calloused from years of ranch work, but his touch was gentle. "I promise you, Deanna, if you give me a chance, I will do everything in my power to make sure you are never lonely again. I will fill your days with laughter and whatever happiness I can manage." Deanna squeezed his hand, feeling something tight and painful in her chest begin to loosen. For the first time since leaving Philadelphia, she felt like she had made the right decision in coming west. "I would like that very much," she said softly. From that evening forward, Tom courted Deanna with a combination of old-fashioned propriety and genuine affection that won over not just her heart but everyone on the ranch. He was always respectful, never overstepping boundaries, but he made his intentions clear. He brought her small gifts, wildflowers and interesting stones, a book of poetry he had ordered from San Antonio. He asked Mrs. Morrison's permission to take Deanna riding on Sunday afternoons, and they would explore the ranch land together, talking about everything and nothing. Deanna learned about Tom's childhood in Kansas, the youngest of 7 brothers in a family that struggled to make ends meet. He spoke lovingly of his mother, who had taught him to read and instilled in him a respect for education and culture, even while working a hardscrabble farm. His father had died when Tom was 15, and he had worked the farm with his brothers until he was old enough to realize there was no future for him there. Coming to Texas had been both terrifying and exhilarating, and he had worked a variety of ranch jobs before finding his place at the Circle Bar 3 years ago. In turn, Deanna told Tom about her own past. Her parents had both died in a typhoid outbreak when she was 16, leaving her with nothing but a small inheritance that barely covered her education. She had lived with her aunt, who had tolerated rather than welcomed her, and had always felt like a burden rather than a beloved family member. Teaching had given her independence and purpose, but she had been profoundly lonely in Philadelphia, surrounded by people but truly known by none of them. "I understand that feeling," Tom said one Sunday afternoon as they sat by a small creek that ran through the ranch property. Being alone in a crowd is sometimes worse than actual solitude, but you are not alone anymore, Deanna. You have me, and I am not going anywhere. Diana leaned her head on his shoulder, marveling at how natural it felt to be close to him. I used to dream about finding someone who would understand me, she said quietly. But I had given up thinking it would actually happen. I thought coming west meant accepting a lifetime of loneliness on the frontier. Tom wrapped his arm around her shoulders. The frontier can be a hard place, he admitted. But it can also be a place where people build new lives and find unexpected happiness. I want to build that life with you, Deanna. I know it is too soon to speak of such things, but I want you to know my intentions are serious. Deanna lifted her head to look at him. How soon is too soon? She asked, her heart pounding. Tom's eyes searched her face. Are you saying what I think you are saying? I am saying that I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you, Deanna said, surprised by her own boldness. I am saying that when I imagine my future now, you are always in it. I am saying that I think I am falling in love with you, Tom Callahan, and it is both terrifying and wonderful. Tom cupped her face in his hands, his touch infinitely tender. I love you too, Deanna. I think I have loved you since the moment I saw you sitting alone, looking so determined not to cry. Will you marry me? I know I should wait longer, should court you properly for months, but life is uncertain out here. I do not want to waste a single day when we could be building our life together. Yes, Deanna said without hesitation. Yes, I will marry you. Tom kissed her then, a soft, sweet kiss that promised a lifetime of tenderness and devotion. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling so broadly it almost hurt. They rode back to the ranch house hand in hand, and Tom immediately sought out Mrs. Morrison to formally ask for her blessing, since Deanna had no family to speak for her. Mrs. Morrison, who had clearly seen the courtship developing under her roof, smiled and gave them her wholehearted approval. I had hoped this would happen, she admitted. You are good for each other. Thomas needs someone to appreciate his gentle heart, and Diana needs someone who will value her strength. I am very happy for you both. The wedding was planned for late June, which gave Deanna 2 months to prepare. Mrs. Morrison insisted on paying for Deanna's wedding dress as a gift, and the fabric was ordered from San Antonio, a beautiful cream-colored silk that seemed impossibly luxurious. The ranch became a flurry of activity as preparations were made. Word spread through the small community, and neighbors Deanna had never met sent congratulations and offers of assistance. Sarah and Benjamin were delighted by the news, particularly when Deanna assured them she would continue teaching them even after she married. Tom and I will have a small house here on the ranch just for us, she explained. But I will come to the main house every day for lessons, just like always. Tom was building that house himself, with help from the other ranch hands. It was going up on a pretty rise about a 1/4 mile from the main house, with a view of the creek and the rolling hills beyond. Deanna would walk over there in the evenings to watch the progress, and Tom would show her each new development with boyish enthusiasm. This will be our bedroom, he said, walking her through the framed structure. And this room here can be for children when we are blessed with them. The kitchen will have a real stove, not just a fireplace, and there will be a porch all along the front where we can sit in the evenings. Deanna imagined their life in this house, and the loneliness she had felt when she first arrived in Texas seemed like a distant memory. She had never expected to be this happy, had never dared to hope for a love this deep and true. As the wedding day approached, Deanna found herself thinking about how dramatically her life had changed in just a few short months. If William Daniels had not died, she would have married a man she barely knew and probably lived a life of dutiful unhappiness. Instead, she had found Tom, a man who made her laugh every single day, who listened when she talked about her thoughts and dreams, who treated her like an equal partner rather than a possession. The wedding took place on a beautiful June morning at the small church in Sweetwater. The church was packed with ranchers and townspeople who had come to celebrate, and Diana was touched by how warmly the community had embraced her. She wore the cream silk dress with wildflowers in her hair, and when she walked down the aisle and saw Tom waiting for her at the altar, his eyes shining with love and pride, she felt like the luckiest woman alive. Tom wore his best suit, clearly not entirely comfortable in the formal attire, but handsome nonetheless. When the Reverend asked him to repeat his vows, his voice rang out strong and clear. "I, Thomas Callahan, take you, Deanna Catherine, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you for all the days of my life. I promise to work hard to provide for you, to make you laugh when you are sad, and to stand by your side through whatever challenges we may face. You have filled my life with joy since the day we met, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to do the same for you." Diana's own vows were equally heartfelt. "I, Deanna Catherine, take you, Thomas Callahan, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you with all my heart, to support your dreams as you support mine, to be your partner in building the life we both want. You found me when I was lost and alone, and you filled my days with laughter and tender moments. I promise to treasure that gift for the rest of my life." There was not a dry eye in the church by the time they were pronounced husband and wife. The celebration afterward at the Morrison Ranch was lively and joyful, with music and dancing and more food than Diana had seen since leaving Philadelphia. Tom never left her side, always touching her hand or her waist, as though he needed constant reassurance that she was truly his now. When they finally escaped to their new home late that evening, Tom carried Diana over the threshold despite her laughing protests. The house was simple but clean and comfortable, with furniture that Tom and the other hands had built themselves. Someone, probably Mrs. Morrison, had filled the main room with wildflowers, and there were wedding gifts stacked on the kitchen table. Tom set Diana down gently and cupped her face in his hands. "Hello, Mrs. Callahan," he said softly. "How does it feel to be married to a cowboy?" "It feels perfect," Diana said honestly. "Absolutely perfect." Their first night as husband and wife was tender and sweet, full of gentle discovery and whispered words of love. Tom was patient and careful with Diana, making sure she felt safe and cherished, and afterward, as they lay tangled together in their marriage bed, Diana felt a contentment so deep it brought tears to her eyes. "Why are you crying?" Tom asked, immediately concerned. "I am just so happy," Diana said, wiping her eyes. "I never thought I could be this happy. I expected loneliness when I came to Texas, and instead I found you." Tom kissed her forehead. "You will never be lonely again," he promised. "I intend to fill every single one of your days with reasons to smile." And he did. The first year of their marriage was a time of joy and discovery. Diana continued teaching the Morrison children while also managing her own household. Tom worked his regular job at the Circle Bar, but spent every spare moment working with horses, building his reputation as a skilled trainer. Ranchers from surrounding areas began bringing him difficult horses, and the extra income allowed them to start saving toward Tom's dream of owning their own land. Their little house became a warm, welcoming space filled with laughter and love. Tom would come home dusty and exhausted from a long day's work, and Diana would have dinner waiting and stories about the children's antics, or something interesting she had read. They would sit on their front porch in the evenings, watching the stars come out and making plans for their future. In the spring of 1879, Deanna discovered she was pregnant. She told Tom one evening after dinner, watching nervously for his reaction. His face went through several expressions in quick succession: shock, joy, wonder, and finally, a kind of fierce protectiveness that made Diana's heart melt. "A baby," he said, his voice hushed with awe. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Diana asked, even though his expression made the answer obvious. Tom pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could hear his heart pounding. "Happy does not even begin to describe what I am feeling. You have given me everything, Deanna. A home, a purpose, love, and now a child. I am the most fortunate man in Texas." The pregnancy was not easy. The Texas heat was brutal that summer, and Deanna suffered from terrible nausea in the early months. But Tom was endlessly patient and attentive, bringing her cool water, rubbing her aching back, and sitting with her on the difficult days when she felt too ill to move. His constant presence and unwavering support made even the worst moments bearable. Mrs. Morrison was equally supportive, giving Diana lighter duties and making sure she rested adequately. The children were excited about the baby, and Sarah particularly would sit with Diana for hours, asking questions about what babies needed and how to take care of them. In November of 1879, after a long and difficult labor, Diana gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him William Thomas Callahan, William after the man whose death had inadvertently brought Diana to Texas, and Thomas after his father. Tom held his son for the first time with tears streaming down his face, staring at the tiny, red-faced infant as though he could not quite believe this miracle was real. "He is perfect," Tom whispered. "Absolutely perfect. Thank you, Deanna. Thank you for this incredible gift." Deanna, exhausted but happy, smiled up at her husband. "He has your eyes," she said. "Or at least he will, I think." Being parents brought new challenges but also new depths to their love. Tom was a devoted father, rising in the night to walk with William when he cried, changing diapers without complaint, and singing lullabies in his rough but tender voice. Deanna would sometimes wake in the early morning to find Tom sitting in the rocking chair with their son, just watching him sleep with an expression of such love and wonder that it made her want to cry. The years that followed were full and rich. Tom's reputation as a horse trainer continued to grow, and by 1881 he had saved enough money to purchase a small piece of land adjacent to the Circle Bar. It was only 80 acres, but it was theirs, and Tom immediately began planning for their future ranch. He built a small barn and started acquiring horses, carefully selecting animals with good bloodlines that he could train and sell. In the spring of 1882, Deanna gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Rose Margaret. She had Deanna's dark hair and delicate features, but her father's sunny temperament. William, now 2.5, was fascinated by his baby sister and insisted on helping with everything, even though his help often created more work than it solved. Life was not without its difficulties. There was a drought in the summer of 1883 that made water scarce and killed off much of the grazing land. Several ranches in the area went under, and even the Morrison Ranch struggled. Tom worked brutal hours trying to keep their growing herd of horses alive, hauling water from the creek and searching for any patch of grass that remained. Deanna rationed their food stores and took in sewing work from other ranchers' wives to bring in extra money. But they survived, as they always did, by working together and refusing to give up. When the rains finally came in the fall, turning the brown landscape green again, Tom and Deanna stood on their porch watching the water fall from the sky and laughing with pure relief. By 1884, Tom's horse ranch was becoming successful enough that he was able to quit his job at the Circle Bar and focus entirely on his own operation. It was a risk, but Mrs. Morrison encouraged him to take it, promising to continue buying horses from him and recommending him to other ranchers. Deanna stopped teaching the Morrison children, who were now old enough to attend the new school that had been built in Sweetwater, and devoted herself full-time to managing their ranch and caring for their growing family. In January of 1885, Deanna gave birth to their third child, another son they named James Henry. He was a colicky baby who cried constantly for the first few months, and Diana and Tom took turns walking the floor with him, both of them exhausted but never losing patience. Tom would joke that James was preparing them for breaking wild horses, since nothing could be more challenging than this tiny tyrant. Through all the challenges and changes, the love between Tom and Diana only deepened. They had built a life together from nothing, had weathered droughts and financial struggles and the exhausting work of raising children while establishing a ranch. But through it all, Tom never failed to make Deanna laugh, to find small ways to show his love, to remind her that she was the center of his world. On quiet evenings, when the children were finally asleep and they had a rare moment alone, they would sit on their porch as they had on the night Tom first told Deanna he loved her, and talk about their journey together. Tom would take Deanna's hand, calloused now from ranch work but still fitting perfectly in his, and thank her for taking a chance on a cowboy with nothing but dreams and determination. "You have given me everything I could have hoped for and so much more," he would say. "A home, a family, a purpose. I wake up every morning grateful that you walked into my life." And Deanna would smile and squeeze his hand and think about the lonely, frightened woman who had arrived in Sweetwater 7 years ago, expecting nothing but hardship and isolation. She had found instead a love that sustained her through every difficulty, a partner who valued her strength and cherished her heart, and a life richer and more fulfilling than anything she could have imagined. Their ranch continued to grow and prosper. By 1886, Tom had built a reputation as one of the best horse trainers in that part of Texas. Ranchers would travel from 100 miles away to purchase his horses or to have him train their difficult animals. He hired 2 young cowboys to help with the daily work, and Deanna managed the business side of things, keeping meticulous accounts and handling correspondence with clients. The original small house had been expanded twice to accommodate their growing family. There was now a proper parlor, a larger kitchen, and upstairs bedrooms for the children. Deanna had planted a garden that provided vegetables through the growing season, and they had chickens, a milk cow, and a growing herd of cattle in addition to the horses. In the fall of 1886, Mrs. Morrison approached Tom with an unexpected proposal. She was getting older and her children were now grown, with Sarah married to a rancher from the next county and Benjamin working at a bank in San Antonio. She wanted to retire to live with Sarah, and was offering to sell the Circle Bar Ranch to Tom at a price well below market value, in recognition of his years of loyal service and his help in keeping the ranch running after her husband's death. It was an incredible opportunity, but it would require taking on substantial debt. Tom and Deanna discussed it for weeks, weighing the risks against the potential rewards. Finally, with Diana's full support, Tom agreed to the purchase. In January of 1887, the Callahan family took ownership of the Circle Bar Ranch, combining it with their existing property to create one of the larger operations in the area. The added responsibility was enormous, and both Tom and Diana worked harder than ever. but they also felt a deep satisfaction in owning land that had become so important to them, in building a legacy they could pass on to their children. Tom hired more hands and focused on breeding quality horses while also maintaining a cattle operation. Deanna managed the household staff and the complex business of running a large ranch, all while caring for 3 active children. Life was busy and often chaotic, but it was also deeply satisfying. Deanna would sometimes pause in the middle of a hectic day, surrounded by the noise and activity of a working ranch, and marvel at how far she had come from that lonely woman sitting on a bench in Sweetwater. She had expected isolation and hardship on the frontier, and had found instead a full, rich life surrounded by people she loved. The children were growing quickly. William, now 7, was fascinated by the horses and followed his father everywhere, already showing Tom's natural gift with animals. Rose, at 5, was a thoughtful, gentle child who loved books and learning as much as her mother did. James, now 2, was an energetic tornado who kept everyone on their toes with his endless curiosity and complete lack of fear. In the summer of 1887, the family took a rare trip to San Antonio, which was growing into a real city. It was the children's first visit to anywhere larger than Sweetwater, and their excitement was contagious. Tom and Deanna walked down the bustling streets with their children, pointing out trolley cars and multi-story buildings, buying ice cream and watching the children's delighted reactions. That evening in their hotel room while the children slept, Deanna said quietly, "Do you ever wish we lived somewhere more civilized, somewhere with culture and amenities and more opportunities?" Tom pulled her close. "Not for a single second. Everything that matters to me is right here in this room or back at the ranch. I would not trade our life for anything. Would you?" Deanna thought about it honestly. She thought about theaters and museums and the things she had known in Philadelphia. And then she thought about the vast Texas sky, the sight of Tom working with horses, the sound of her children's laughter echoing across their land, the deep satisfaction of building something real and lasting with her own hands. "No," she said firmly, "I would not trade it either. This is home. You are home." The years continued to pass in a blur of work and growth and love. In 1888, Deanna gave birth to their 4th child, a daughter they named Emma Jane. She was a calm, easy baby, and Deanna joked that she was the universe's way of apologizing for James's difficult infancy. In 1890, their 5th and final child was born, another son they named Samuel Robert. Tom would sometimes shake his head in wonder at their large, noisy family. "5 children," he would say. "When I was a lonely cowboy working at the Circle Bar, I never imagined I would be blessed with such riches." Deanna understood completely. She had come west expecting loneliness, braced for hardship, prepared for a life of mere survival. Instead, she had found joy and love and a sense of belonging she had never known before. Tom had filled her days not just with laughter and tender moments, but with purpose and partnership, and a love that grew stronger with each passing year. The children grew and thrived under their parents' loving care. William, true to his early fascination, became an expert horseman and helped his father with the training operation. Rose discovered a talent for art and would spend hours drawing the Texas landscape and the animals on the ranch. James channeled his boundless energy into hard work, always the first to volunteer for any task no matter how difficult. Emma was the peacemaker of the family, always smoothing over disagreements and making sure everyone felt included. And young Samuel, the baby, was spoiled by all his older siblings but remained remarkably sweet-natured. In 1895, when Deanna was 39 and Tom was 42, They celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary. The children, with help from some of the ranch hands, organized a surprise party. The whole community showed up, people from all the surrounding ranches and from Sweetwater, which had grown into a proper town with a railroad station and several new businesses. Standing in the yard of the ranch house they had built together, surrounded by friends and neighbors and their 5 beautiful children, Tom raised a glass for a toast. 20 years ago, I met a woman sitting alone on a bench in town, and I knew immediately that my life had just changed forever. Deanna, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. You took a chance on a cowboy with nothing but dreams, and you helped me build those dreams into something real and lasting. Every single day with you has been a gift. Here is to 20 more years, and then 20 more after that, and as many as God sees fit to give us. Deanna felt tears running down her face, but they were happy tears. She looked around at everything they had built together, not just the physical ranch but the family and the community and the life full of love and laughter. When I came to Texas, I expected loneliness, she said, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet crowd. I expected hardship and isolation. Instead, I found this man who has filled every single one of my days with joy. Tom Callahan, you are the love of my life, and I would not change a single moment of our journey together. The party continued late into the evening, with music and dancing and storytelling. The older children danced with their parents, and eventually even little Samuel was twirling around the yard, his laughter ringing out across the Texas night. When the guests finally left and the exhausted children were in bed, Tom and Deanna walked hand in hand to their favorite spot on the porch, where they had sat so many times over the years. 20 years, Tom mused. It seems like yesterday and forever ago all at once. I know exactly what you mean, Deanna said, leaning her head on his shoulder. Sometimes I try to remember what my life was like before you, and I honestly cannot imagine it. You know what I am most proud of? Tom asked. Not the ranch as much as I love it. Not even the horses, though that has been the work of my heart. What I am most proud of is that our children are growing up knowing they are loved. They have never felt alone or unwanted or like a burden. We have given them something neither of us really had growing up, a home where love is abundant and freely given. Deanna squeezed his hand, thinking about the lonely girl she had been and the lonely boy Tom had been, and how together they had created something neither had experienced in their own childhoods. We did that, she agreed. Together. As they sat there under the stars, listening to the familiar sounds of the ranch settling down for the night, Deanna thought about the strange path that had led her to this moment. If William Daniels had not died, if Tom had not seen her sitting alone that day, if Mrs. Morrison had not needed help, if any of 100 small things had been different, she would never have found this life, this love, this perfect contentment. But all those things had happened in just the right order, at just the right time. She had come to the frontier expecting loneliness, and had instead found a cowboy who filled her days with laughter and tender moments, just as he had promised he would on the day he asked to court her. Every difficulty they had faced together. Every joy had been doubled because they shared it. The years that followed their anniversary were good ones. The ranch continued to prosper, and Tom's reputation as a horse breeder and trainer became known throughout Texas and beyond. William took on more and more responsibility, showing that he had inherited not just his father's skill with horses, but also his integrity and work ethic. Rose, at 18, was being courted by a young lawyer from San Antonio, a kind young man who Tom approved of after careful scrutiny. James, now 15, was already taller than his father and worked alongside the ranch hands with tireless enthusiasm. Emma and Samuel were still in school, bright and curious children who kept Diana busy with their questions and their dreams. Tom and Deanna settled into their middle years with grace and gratitude. Tom's hair was now more gray than brown, and Deanna had lines around her eyes from years of squinting into the Texas sun. But they were still as in love as they had been on their wedding day. Tom still brought Deanna wildflowers when he found them on the range. Deanna still made sure Tom's favorite meals appeared on the table. They still sat on their porch in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing, their hands intertwined. In 1898, Rose married her lawyer, and the wedding was a joyous occasion that brought the whole community together. Watching his daughter walk down the aisle, Tom cried unabashedly, and Diana held his hand tightly, understanding completely. Their little girl was starting her own journey now, building her own life and love story. By 1900, the 20th century dawning, the Callahan Ranch was one of the most successful in that part of Texas. William had married a neighboring rancher's daughter and was building his own house on the property, planning to take over more of the operation as Tom gradually stepped back. Rose was living in San Antonio and expecting her first child, making Diana and Tom grandparents. The three younger children were all thriving, each with their own talents and dreams. Tom and Diana were now in their mid-50s, old by frontier standards, but both still healthy and active. They had worked hard all their lives, and it showed in their calloused hands and weathered faces, but it also showed in everything they had built. The ranch, the children, the community ties, the legacy they were leaving. One evening in early summer, as they sat in their customary place on the porch, Deanna said thoughtfully, "Do you remember the day we met? How I was sitting alone in town, trying not to cry, thinking my life was over?" Tom smiled. "I remember thinking you were the bravest person I had ever seen. Sitting there alone in a strange place, determined not to show how frightened you were. I remember wanting to know you to help you, to maybe make you smile." "You did so much more than make me smile," Deanna said softly. "You gave me everything. A home, a family, a purpose, love beyond anything I could have imagined. You kept your promise, Tom. You filled my days with laughter and tender moments always." Tom brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "And you gave me the same. You saw something worthwhile in a cowboy with nothing but dreams. You worked beside me to build this life. You gave me children and partnership and a love that has sustained me through everything. Every day with you has been a blessing, Deanna." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the land they had worked so hard to build. The sounds of the ranch drifted to them, horses whinnying in the corral, cattle lowing in the distance, the voices of their children and grandchildren who were visiting. It was a symphony of home, of belonging, of love realized and dreams achieved. Diana thought about the lonely woman she had been 22 years ago, arriving in a dusty frontier town with $17 and a broken dream. She thought about all the ways her life might have gone, all the hardships she might have faced, all the loneliness she had braced herself to endure. And then she looked at the man beside her, still holding her hand after all these years, and felt a gratitude so profound, it brought tears to her eyes. "I love you, Tom Callahan," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I have loved you from the beginning, and I will love you until the end." "And I love you, Deanna Callahan," Tom replied, his blue eyes still as bright and full of warmth as they had been the day they met. "You are my heart, my home, my everything. Today, tomorrow, and always." As the stars began to appear in the vast Texas sky, they remained on their porch, Two people who had found each other against all odds and built a life of love and laughter on the frontier. Deanna had expected loneliness when she came west, but instead she had found her soulmate, a cowboy who had kept his promise to fill her days with joy and tender moments. And in giving her that gift, Tom had received the same in return, a love that sustained them both through every challenge and made every triumph sweeter. Their story was one of faith rewarded, of kindness returned, of two lonely souls finding each other in a harsh land and creating beauty together. It was a love story for the ages, written in the dust and grass of Texas, in the walls of the home they built together, in the faces of their children and grandchildren, in every sunrise they watched together, and every evening they spent side by side. As they finally rose to go inside, Tom paused and pulled Deanna close, kissing her with the same tenderness he had shown on their wedding night decades ago. "Thank you," he whispered against her hair, "for everything, for saying yes, for building this life with me, for being my partner in all things." Deanna smiled up at him, her heart full. "Thank you," she replied, "for finding me when I was lost, for seeing me when I felt invisible, for loving me so completely and so well. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Tom Callahan." They walked inside together, their hands still linked as they had been throughout their entire journey. The house was warm and welcoming, filled with the memories of decades of love and family. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new joys, as every day did on a working ranch. But they would face it together, as they had faced everything together, with love and